welcome to Procurement Pivots, the podcast for procurement professionals wanting to navigate change successfully and create career success on your own terms. I'm Donna Bowden, procurement career coach and founder of Narrate Your Career.
And I'm Laura Sellers, executive coach for procurement and founder of Coaching for Procurement. And between us, we bring almost 25 years of supporting and working with procurement professionals. And it's fair to say we've navigated many of our own career pivots along the way. And now we're here to help you do the same.
Each episode will share practical strategies, honest conversations, and expert insights to help you confidently tackle the changes and challenges in your procurement career.
Let's get started. Okay, so today's episode is all about impact. So what are your initial thoughts on this, Donna?
Well, I think we've chosen to talk about impact today because we've been talking about those words and themes and topics that come up really regularly for both of us. And actually, it's very rare, certainly for myself, to have a session with a client where we're not touching on this in some shape or form. So yeah, it's a recurring topic in both of our worlds. So we thought this was a great topic to delve into deeper in today's episode.
Yeah, brilliant thing. And I like what you said when we were talking about this um, before we came into the recording, was just around that it comes up so often, but once we delve into it, it means different things to different people. It's very context dependent, which we talk about a lot when it comes to coaching. So I guess the good place to start is around that initial impact that they are having on others. That's sometimes what they come to us with. I know certainly a lot of my clients recently have been around wanting to have a greater impact in their role, and it's about what they're doing for others in their role as a supporting function in procurement. Is that what your clients are coming with?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of the work that I'm doing with my clients is around their strategic positioning, getting themselves ready for the next move, showcasing, their value to others. That can be internally and externally, I have to add. So yeah, I think a lot of the time, we're heavily focused on the impact that they're having on others, but particularly because they're wanting to position themselves for the next opportunity within their career.
Yeah. I like what you say about internally and externally, because I think certainly from the focused conversations that we have, it is more about internally. It's about the impact on their stakeholders, on the exec. And but even though we're talking about two different scenarios there, if you're talking about the next move externally, or if you're talking about impact internally with somebody, there's a lot of common threads, and it always comes down to self for me, how well you know yourself, what you know your strengths are, where your impact is greater in some areas than others. So it's definitely something that even though we might be thinking about different scenarios in our coaching conversations, some of the essence of what impact is very applicable to all of it.
Definitely. And I think as well, there's so many conversations going on about, the value that procurement brings, the seat at the table, the influence over the business. But a lot of that actually, it does come down to, what impact are you having and who recognizes and who sees that impact. Yeah, I think it's a really important topic and looking forward to getting stuck in a bit more today.
Okay, so where should we start then?
Well, shall we start? I think for me, a lot of my clients come to me, wanting to really be able to showcase the impact that they've had, often historically, I would say, and showcase that to others, potentially to explore new opportunities, or position themselves for longer term career moves later down the line. So, should we start with that kind of that self piece? So actually, start with the impact that individuals are having on others in the business, in the organization.
Yeah, no, that's a great one. I think something that really helps others when we're talking it through about that impact is about breaking it down, because your impact doesn't need to be the same across all those different people when you're talking about who those people are. And there are some matrices that you can use to sort of say if you've got high influence, high interest and all that sort of thing. But in general, when you think about your world within your career, you've got your immediate people, you've got your team, you've got your line manager, you've got close stakeholders, you've got exec, you've got lots of different people. And sometimes that can feel really overwhelming in itself. I need to be this big, impactful person. And not to mention that sometimes the word impact means, oh, I need to be the most vocal person. I need to be someone who's a real extrovert, when so many of my clients, and perhaps yours too, they identify as introverts. So
Absolutely.
so that's something as well that that can really feel like it can get in the way. So I think the first step is always to break it down, break down who you need to have that impact with, and is the impact the same? There will be some really core elements of where, like your values, for example, what matters to you, what drives your decision making, what drives your behavior. There are some core threads that will go through all of those different stakeholder groups. But to really sort of break it down and take the pressure off a little bit, I
Mm,
think it's really useful to break down who it is you need to think about, the way that you're impacting them. So, for example, your team, you need to be able to lead them. You need to be able to support them in their
yeah.
development. And with impact with your line manager, it might be more around, okay, what's their communication? I can't get my words out today. What's their communication style? What do they need from me? I don't know
Yeah.
whether that resonates.
Yeah, and I think as well, I think it's really important to think about what do you actually want as well. Actually, when it comes to that impact, using the team example, what's the impact that you actually want to have on your team? How do you want them to perceive you? What is it that you're actually most hoping to influence? And I think actually, like some of this comes down to just giving yourself that space to reflect as
Yeah.
well. Like we've said it before, haven't we? But we're all so busy. We're stuck in the job. Like, we're working really hard, working all the hours, going home, have busy lives outside of work. And actually often we don't create that space for ourselves to really stop and think, what impact do I want to have? Like, how can I be a bit more considered or a bit more intentional in terms of how I'm approaching different relationships and different situations? So for me, I think it does come down to yeah, what is it that you're hoping to achieve? Like, what's the most desired impact that you'd love to have? The goal essentially, and like you say, breaking it down and working out like what are those things that you can do to kind of to get that bit closer to that impact that you're hoping to have. But again, I think as well, like I like your point about the introverts. Like, I hear that a lot with people that I work with and talk to, and actually sometimes the impact, it's not about the loudest voice necessarily. It can be who's the most interested, with the stakeholder, like who's shown the most genuine interest to actually get to know that stakeholder and their challenges and their problems, and really listen to how you can provide that solution. So yeah, I think that's a really valid point, that it's not about being the loudest in the room at all, but it's, yeah, really defining for yourself, what does that impact, what do you want that impact to look like?
Yeah, I think that's a great one. And there's so many strands I could pull out of that as well, because there was a thing about what you want to have and making sure it's you that wants to have it. Because sometimes I had this procurement leader come to me and said that they'd been advised or had feedback, I think it was, in a meeting with their line manager, that they needed to become more visible. And we're going to cover visibility, but I think it's just the element of they've been told they need to do something. So when it comes back to impact and about the impact you want to have, let's make sure, and in a coaching perspective, I would always make sure and check in that the goal is theirs. Because if you're coming with a goal to be more impactful, but it's a goal that somebody else has given you, well, the motivation's not always aligned with that. And
Mhm.
so it's really important to know what you want, but also make sure the goal is yours. And if it is
Yeah.
a goal for impact that's been given to you by, you've been tasked with it by the organization, by your line manager, it's about making sure you can align what matters to you in that role you're in at the moment for the impact, and that it meets the needs of what you're being told to do as well. So
Yeah,
I think that's really important. There's so often when we hear should, I should be doing this, I should
yeah,
be doing that, I should be more impactful, I should be an
yeah,
extrovert.
yeah,
But hold on, let's not reinvent who you are. It's not about reinventing or changing you, it's about bringing the best out of you.
yeah,
So that's for me a really important piece of the puzzle when we're talking about impact. It's got to align with who that person is. We're not going to take out the introvert and put an extrovert in there. That's not the way it works, in my view.
yeah. No, absolutely. So yeah. So I think just defining what it is you want that impact to actually to look like. But I think as well, like something that comes up quite a lot in my conversations. I think many people aren't aware of the impact they're having on others.
Mhm.
They're not.
Yeah.
I think feedback is it's such a powerful tool. Like asking for feedback, but then actually sharing that feedback with others. But the amount of times, like, when I'm working with my clients to, working on their career narrative or their story, how they're articulating their impact, like a lot of the time, like it actually takes quite a lot of thought and work to really become clear on the impact they've had. So I do think as well, there's an element of like it's so important, it's so powerful to get that sense check and get that feedback from the people that you're working with, because clearly, great feedback is positive. You can use that, you can share that in the right way at the right time, but also constructive feedback is really good for your learning and your growth as well. So I think actually having a mechanism for gauging how successful that impact is really important as well.
That's such a good point about feedback because I always think as well that the higher you go or the more experienced you become in your career, the less feedback is given to you because people assume that if you're in a senior position or if you're really experienced in a particular area, that you already know what you're good at. There's this assumption, I hear it all the time, because somebody sees them as good at something, they don't need telling. Whereas actually the opposite can be true, because the
Mm,
higher up the ladder you go, as an example, the less you get told what you're good at, and therefore you can get that element of imposter syndrome or that isolation, that feeling of, I don't quite know who I am anymore, because as you go up or as you become more experienced, your goals change or your position changes, and therefore you need that regular feedback to keep that confidence going, you know
yeah,
so that's what resonated with me when you were talking about the positive feedback. We need to let people, even if we think they already know it, most of the time people don't get feedback directly. We're so averse to giving feedback in a lot of
yeah,
ways. So that from a positive point of view, I think that's a really good practice. From a constructive point of view, this is also really interesting from what you were saying, because I remember facilitating some 360 feedback with people,
yeah,
and they'll go to ask people who they know will give them feedback and who will probably give them good feedback as
yeah,
well. And while that is good, you need to have your challengers in there, the
yeah,
people who will give you a different lens to look through, that will hold the mirror up to you, because we are uncomfortable with giving constructive feedback, and that can often be the most valuable feedback of all.
yeah. So I think, your point is it's great for us to give it, but actually I think as individuals it's great for us to ask for it as well. That's the
Yes.
thing. If we can go through our everyday life, in relevant opportunities and moments, like be asking those key people, your line manager, your team, your stakeholders, maybe your peers as well, even suppliers. Like there's so many people that surround you as a procurement professional that can just give you such valuable insight as to what's going well, but actually where your growth opportunity sits as well. So yeah, I'm a big believer in that as well.
Yeah.
um, but I think as well, looking at the kind of the internal journey, we are living in a world where it's harder to get promoted a lot of the
Mm.
time. There are fewer opportunities. There's not as many organizations that are in massive growth mode. So actually being recognized and valued and having others in the organization that are aware of the impact you're having is really key. for those internal moves and for that internal visibility. And so, yeah, I think when you've got that feedback and when you do have that genuine understanding of the positive impact that you've had on others, like it's then looking at how can you share that in a way that feels comfortable, in a way that doesn't feel like you're bragging or being really arrogant in what you've delivered, but in a way that the right people understand. So, in your career reviews, appraisals, your you know promotion opportunities, interviews, etc., it's looking at how can you weave some of that in so that everyone is aware of that impact that you've had, because it's great if you've had a positive impact and it's great if you understand it, but if others around also aren't aware of it, actually that's where sometimes people feel that their career is, it's stagnating, because there isn't necessarily always that recognition of, those really great things that you've been doing.
Yeah, that's a great point. So where would you say with your clients then, when it comes to asking for that feedback from others, where where
Uh,
where do they start with that?
where in the journey, or
Well, just in the organization, for example, you say about, who you reach out to. It could even go
yeah.
to suppliers, how do they best start that journey with getting that feedback?
Well, I suppose it probably depends on what their greatest goals are and where they're looking to get to next.
Mm.
So the thing is, if you're not in a situation where you've been asking for feedback or being given feedback voluntarily, probably it's going to feel quite overwhelming, I would say, if you've gone from not doing that to suddenly having to ask all of these different people. So I think it would come down to really looking at what that next step is, what you want that next step to be, and actually thinking about which groups of people are probably most likely to be able to influence you taking that next step. So I think I wouldn't necessarily say it's kind of one size fits all and you do that and then you do that, you do that. I think it very much would depend on what that next journey looks like. What about
Yeah.
yourself? What do you think?
Yeah, very true. I mean, from an internal perspective, when it comes to getting feedback, we do sort of a little stakeholder assessment, let's say, of who they need to get on board, who they need to build better relationships with. Like you said, it's context dependent. I think it's an element of marrying that up with the what impact you want to have that we discussed
Mm.
earlier, and then identifying the relevant people for you as well. You mentioned something earlier that I'd really like to come on to actually, but I've forgotten the exact words that you used. But it's more around that element of self as well, that the impact that when you're not aware of the impact that you have on others, and you might not be aware either of the impact that others have on you.
Mm.
There's a lot there to explore, isn't there, when it comes to impact both as self, as the individual, how is what is going on in your procurement career impacting what's going on for you in your life overall, or
Yeah.
vice versa. And there's also the element of other people. So where would you where would you like to explore on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think where shall we? It's all a good point. I mean, maybe I think, lots of people, I think they do think about the impact they're having on others, but I think a lot of the time then they're not always thinking about the impact that those other people are then also having on them, and how they choose to respond to kind of whatever it is that's coming into their direction. So yeah, I do think maybe let's start with that, kind of thinking about what impact are others around you in your day-to-day work life. What impact are others having on you as an individual?
Yeah, that's such a good one. The amount of times that we have a conversation in coaching conversations where it's around, is it theirs or is it yours?
Mm,
Because some of us can be really, I identify as an empath, so I can easily identify how I'm feeling, but also I recognize it in others. But sometimes there have been times over my career, but also in life where I think about actually, that wasn't mine. That wasn't my stuff. That was
yeah.
somebody else's. And I've taken that on as my own.
Mm,
So, and like you say, it's about how you then deal with it, or how you recognize that that impact is not all yours to carry,
Yeah.
you know?
I think that's the thing. We often we take on that stuff that's out of our control, don't we?
Yeah.
It's like, some of that is not within our control, but actually how we choose to respond to it is, we can't necessarily influence what's coming our way, but actually we can decide how we choose to respond to it, and kind of, how we feel about it as well.
Mm. Yeah, and choosing that response isn't always easy because we all have our
Yeah.
own thoughts, feelings, behaviors, our own default positions that we take up when we're under pressure. And this is where self-awareness really comes into play, right? So I will always come back to the same, you'll probably hear me on other episodes, it always comes back to self. So recognizing when it is yours and when it isn't, when things are outside of your control, things you can influence, but what is really under our control can also help us to break it down. And once you really start to get a sense of that self-awareness, a sense of what impact others are having on you and how that impacts how you show up in your role,
Mm.
I think it can really be valuable. It's a really valuable insight for making decisions on your next steps, really, on what you want to do in your career, whether that is an external
Mm.
move, whether it is an internal one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also, like touching on to the kind of the other things that have a big impact on us as individuals. We were talking about this earlier, weren't we? That often the company that we work for, or the role that we're actually doing, you know, it not only impacts us in our work life, but when things are going really well and it's really positive at work, like often we feel happier in our personal life. But when things aren't going so well, and things are having that kind of negative impact on our work life, like it is so, so common then for that to very, very quickly creep into all other aspects of our life. We're one person, and it's impossible to completely segment those different areas of our life. So I think also it's just really thinking about, the impact, positive and negative, that the company that you choose to work for can have on all aspects of your life. And the choice that you make about the role that you do, again, like, yes, that affects you, but it also affects your family, it also
Mhm.
affects your friends, it can affect your health, your well-being, your enjoyment of life. And yeah, so I think it's also just really, I would encourage everyone to also think about those other kind of elements as well, and just really think about, how your work situation is impacting on other areas of your life as well.
Yeah, it's such a good point because I also think this is more of a thing since we've done more remote working as well. So
Yeah.
I used to work in a role where my commute was an hour long, and I actually I didn't enjoy sitting in traffic when it happened. It was quite a smooth journey, but I used to enjoy having that time to myself in the car with a coffee, listening to a podcast, but also on the way home, disconnecting. Whereas
Yeah.
when we are home based, if we're doing more remote working and we're sitting at home, there's not a lot of time to disconnect between your role when you're sitting in an office, if you're lucky to have an
Yeah.
office, and then walking downstairs to, to where life is, where family life is. And
Yeah.
I think being able to recognize that separation
Mm.
is really valuable because, like you say, it can really have, if things aren't going well, it can have a huge impact on things at home and vice versa. If things
Yeah.
outside of work are not going great, it can show up at your work as well.
Yeah.
So I think, and again, that comes back to that self-awareness of recognizing, where I keep doing this with my hands if you're watching on YouTube. I keep doing that because I think it is an element of creating space
Yeah.
in between the work you and the you
Yeah.
who exists outside of work as well. You are a whole person while you go to your procurement role. There's an element of what can I leave at the door?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just with, a lot of the work that I do with clients, it is about them positioning themselves for their next move. So sometimes that may be internal, often it's kind of positioning themselves for their next external move. And like the topic of impact just comes up so frequently. So I did think as well, it just might be useful just to share, really kind of some of the conversations that I have quite regularly with people, because clients are coming to me, they're talking about what they've done, in their previous roles, what they're looking to do. But I think sometimes people they talk in description. I worked here for 3 years, I worked on that category for 2 years, did a bit of this, did a bit of that, then I did this. But actually, a lot of the time people through their conversation, they're not focusing on the impact that they've had. And this is why this is such a recurring topic in the conversations that I'm having, because we're living in times, there have been fewer roles. It's much more competitive, particularly at senior levels. There's a lot of very good people available on the marketplace. And if those organizations are talking to many people, they're hearing the same things for everyone. I'm really good with stakeholders. I'm really good with, building a team. I'm really good at negotiating with suppliers. But actually, it's the impact that people really remember. So I just think it's really important to, whether you're positioning yourself internally or externally, internally, you want as many of the right people internally to understand the positive impact you've had on others internally. Externally, you want to be able to showcase that as well. And so I just think, just remember the actual impact that you have, and show the impact, because that's the value, that's the differentiator. And just I think whether you're looking at your LinkedIn profile, your CV, how you're engaging with people in brand new networking conversations, what you're saying when you're catching up with old colleagues, or even in an interview situation, it's like, just always try and remember to think about the impact that you had in that role, and what you actually kind of brought to the role, because that is what people are kind of, that's what they remember.
It's the storytelling, isn't it?
Totally.
It's the storytelling
Totally.
of how you helped X stakeholder to achieve Y. It's, definitely a huge component of positioning yourself and on that impact. And it's like that saying, isn't it, about people won't always remember what you did, and it's more about how you made them feel. Something around that.
Absolutely.
I've butchered that completely, but
Yeah.
hopefully you get my sentiment with it. But yeah, I think there's definitely something around that storytelling. Because if I think back to the people who have most impacted me in my career, and how I feel I've impacted other people, then it definitely comes back to certain stories, certain scenarios where
Yeah.
where we've worked through something together. So yeah, and I think there's so much more we could go into with detail for this,
Always.
because, well, like you said to me earlier about how it all travels in different directions because it's unique to the person, but hopefully there's a lot of food for thought there when it comes to impact and what that means in your procurement career.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess from our side, like, we've spoken about lots of different aspects of impact, and I'm sure we will probably delve into many of them at various points moving forwards. But I think we just really encourage you to just take stock. Firstly, try and create the time for some self-reflection. Like, that is such a gift. We live these busy lives, and we don't stop, and we don't think. So just really, like, try, and even if it is just a few moments, like, just try and think about what aspects of your career right now, like, where would you like to kind of improve that impact, and just have a think about what one thing could you do that hopefully is going to drive that impact forward over the coming weeks.
Yeah, that's such a great point. It's like breaking it down, isn't it? To then see what impact, or for want of a better word, like to see what domino effect it can have on
Yeah.
other areas of your role, your career, and your life outside
Yeah.
of procurement as well. So hopefully, yeah, that, like you say, we will delve into a lot of these in another time. But from today's point of view, hopefully we've given some food for thought there about creating the space, breaking it down, and then deciding where to start on those first steps.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. It's
Yeah,
great
thank
to have
you.
you here.
See you next time. Thank you for tuning in to Procurement Pivots. We hope today's episode gave you actionable tips to help you to continue to move forward in your procurement career.
If you enjoyed the conversation, follow our episodes, share them with others, and please support us on our social media channels for others that might be interested to tune in.